All right, team. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. This is the first of a series of calls and events that we're putting together this fall as part of what we're calling the Hunting with Heart series. And this is the second time that we've ran this. We ran this, or actually, no, sorry, the third time we've ran this. We ran this back in the spring, and then we ran it last fall as well. And it's basically our intention to create opportunity and accessibility for people that feel that kind of calling deep inside, to want to have a deeper relationship with their food, a deeper relationship with the land, and maybe weren't brought up around hunting, or maybe they were, but they didn't have mentors that made it accessible to them, and it's something that they're really feeling called and interested to explore, or maybe you've even started in your earlier on in your journey, and you're looking for some community and support around that. And what I can say is, somebody that was actually brought up in an urban setting, hunting was something that I really didn't understand. And most of the people I was around didn't understand. So there's a lot of value in having a community of people to support you kind of on this journey and path. So yeah, we wanted to kind of pay it forward, I guess, for the people that have been there for us. And we've put this series together. We also have a course and a program that we've put together to mentor people that want to go a bit deeper. And we'll tell you about that a little bit later in the night as well. But let me just start off with a couple of logistical pieces that are really important. So first of all, we are going to be putting the replay out. If you have any issues with video or audio cutting in and out, my first suggestion would be just log out and then log back in. Sometimes that's enough to fix it. If your signal is really spotty for some reason, then I don't know if there's much we can do about it. You'll just have to watch for the replay afterwards. The second thing I just want to mention, and I suspect that we're calling in the right people here, and people are on the same page here tonight. But our team with this project really come together with some shared values. One, and the first and foremost is respect for all people. You're welcome to be here tonight, regardless of your experience level, regardless of your gender, regardless of your ethnicity. We want this to be a welcoming space for anybody that wants to come in, that wants to learn about this stuff, and that is willing to kind of hold to that code about respect for all people. So I'm just going to ask that people hold to that in the chat room tonight. It's not the place to talk about politics. We do sometimes dive into politics as they relate to hunting, but I don't think that'll be a big part of tonight's conversation. And I think a lot of us are kind of pretty burnt out with politics these days anyways. So tonight we're going to really focus on this deep relationship that humans and animals have had for so long, and the quest for food. So that's our theme for tonight. So I'm going to ask people to respect that. Beyond that, we also have these values of reverence for the species that we hunt. We're not out there trophy hunting, and that's not saying that some of us don't, push our skills and sometimes even chase larger animals in the pursuit of our skills and have a relationship with that. But reverence for the species that we hunt, holding all life as sacred, is a shared value, and stewardship of the land coming first. As hunters, we promote making choices for the environment beyond or before our own needs. So these are all values that we share as a team here. And we also believe in indigenous land rights. And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of shifting around that in the world right now. And, this conversation of reconciliation is a big one. And, that's something that we support as a team here. People of indigenous backgrounds sometimes have different abilities to hunt on the land with different tactics, different seasons, whatever, than someone like myself do. And I personally support that. So I just wanted to let you know that that's what we kind of stand behind. And if you agree to all that, then please stick around. And if you're challenged by all that, then maybe it's not the right place for you to be here tonight. So I'll just lay it out like that. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. So who is this call for tonight? We have designed this kind of experience. I mean, it's for anyone that's interested. There's actually a bunch of folks I know that are attending that have already hunted and have been hunting for a long time, and they just love showing up and hearing stories and connecting with other people. So really, it's for anyone that connects with those values. But the actual content that we're going to teach tonight is really geared towards kind of three categories. So somebody that's just exploring whether hunting's right for you. And if you have no idea, like maybe you're a vegan right now, and you're just like, I don't actually know, but I've got this thing about hunting and I just want to figure out, I want to learn more about what it's all about. I just want to try and understand it. That's totally cool if that's why you're here tonight. So if you're someone just exploring the idea of hunting and whether it's right for you or whether you even feel okay with it or not, that's totally cool. It's also for people that know deep inside that they want to hunt. They want that deeper relationship with their food, but they don't know how to get started, or they are looking for support with next steps. And then it's for people that are early on in their path, that you've made that jump. Maybe you've got your license, maybe you've even been out a couple of times, but you're realizing now like how overwhelming it is and how much of a learning curve it is. Hunting really is a lifelong journey. I've been doing it for over a decade right now. Caleb and Cal, two of our instructors, have been doing it for their entire lives, and we're all learning all the time. It really is a lifelong journey, and it's amazing how deep it goes as the layers of the onion peel back as we develop our knowledge of the land and these amazing species that we get to share it with, and that when we're lucky or when our skills come together, feed us. It's quite a beautiful journey. So yeah, so that's kind of who we put this together for tonight. And then last, I'm going to just go over our game plan, and then we'll kind of dive into the first official topic for the night. So our goal is to be roughly an hour for kind of the main component of the call. And then we're going to do a question and answer period at the very end. And this is how we're going to kind of break it down. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an opening story, and then we're going to explore a couple of barriers and myths. That was kind of the theme of tonight's call. So we're going to chat about one of the big barriers, like finding your community and your people. It can be really intimidating to getting started when you don't have people that share your values or even understand hunting, or you don't have a mentor. If you weren't, a huge percentage of people that get into hunting get into it because their family were hunters. And for a lot of us, myself included, that lineage was broken in our family. And suddenly it feels very daunting to figure out how to move forward in that. So we're kind of trying to repair the gap in that lineage with our work here today. So we're going to chat a little bit about finding your people. We're going to chat about kind of top tips, and these will be weaved in throughout the night. But for people that want to get into this, what are some of the first things you can be thinking about, and what are some of our best advice for getting going? We're going to be chatting about sustainability, because that's super important as well to all of us. There's a lot of things that are done in the hunting world that I don't personally agree with. And, hunters have definitely decimated wildlife populations around the globe. And it's one of the reasons that hunters often get a bad name. But simultaneously, the land we're on right here, I live up in the Muskoka area of Ontario. One of our instructors here tonight, Caleb, part of his ancestry is Anishinaabe. His people have been hunting here for thousands of years, and the food has sustained them. So they've shown us that there is a model that hunting can be sustainable even over a long period of time. And part of our mission with this work is, as new people are getting into hunting, to have conversations about how do we make sure that we don't make some of the mistakes of the recent past where hunters have obliterated species and really knocked the populations back. And what are other things we can even do in hunting to reduce our environmental impact while we're out there? So that's a conversation we get into as well. So we're going to try and do our best to dive through a bunch of that tonight. One last thing I'll share is, if you're around next Tuesday evening, we're going to do a second call in this series. And next Tuesday is actually going to be a lot about storytelling. So the theme next week is going to be why we hunt and the powerful stories and ways it's impacted our lives. So all of our instructors are going to be sharing a little bit about their relationship with hunting and what it means to them, and sharing some stories from the actual field. So if you're around next Tuesday, please tune in for that one. It's going to be a very interesting one and a very different probably event than tonight. So okay, so I'm just going to take a breath here. I get talking fast always at the beginning of these things, and I like to slow myself down a little. I see you laughing there, Caleb. So I had a really beautiful moment today. I went out to this pond back behind my house, and I'm really fortunate to live out in the woods up in the Muskoka region here. And I was back sitting on this pond today, and I do occasionally hunt duck, and I also hunt deer around this area. And it's been a pretty warm late summer and a pretty warm start to September so far. And what I've been noticing is the wind has been mostly blowing out of the south the last couple of weeks, the south and the west. And I haven't really been noticing many flocks of birds. Now, there's definitely geese around, there's ducks around, and they're definitely in flocks. But those flocks are they're relatively small. You're not seeing the hundreds of geese, or at least I'm not, like those massive flocks coming in the field. I'm seeing groups of 20 or 30. And what that tells me is those are the resident geese that have actually been around all season, and they're just starting to clump up together right now. But when they change from those flocks of 20 or 30 geese or 20 or 30 ducks to 100, 200, 300 on the pond, that's when the migration is full on. So while I was sitting back at the pond today, I put on a jacket because I was like, oh my goodness, it's starting to feel cool. And I had this moment of just tipping in and being like, oh, the wind just shifted. Since I've been up this morning, it's blowing straight out of the north right now. And the hair went up on the back of my neck because I was like, ooh, I know what that means. That means the birds are coming. which is super exciting because what they do, if you think about an economy of energy, birds travel on the winds, right? So if there's a good strong breeze coming out of the south for 3 or 4 days at a time, it's really not the most efficient time for birds way up north to think about flying south. And if it's coming out of the south, it's probably pretty warm a fair ways north of me as well. But as soon as we start to get those temperatures that drop down to that frost range, or maybe even get those light snows in the north, combine that with a nice strong north wind, and it's amazing day to day how much the bird population can change. And I'll maybe throw that out to you as a group right now. Even if you're not hunting and it feels far away, starting to cultivate your awareness is probably one of the best tools that you can start to do now, even if you live in a city, that will actually help you if you start to get into hunting down the road. So here's one challenge right off the bat now for all you new hunters to hold on your awareness. As you're out and about your day the next couple of days, pay attention to where you're seeing ducks and geese and the size of the flocks. Pay attention to which way the wind is blowing from. And, over the next month, there's going to be days where it's coming from the south, the east, the west, the north. But if you're going to bed at night and it's been blowing out of the south for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh, it's shifting, like there's some cold air coming in from the north, notice that. And then watch the next couple of days and see if those flocks actually grow in size. Just a real fun awareness activity to start to think about predicting when the next wave of birds are going to be coming south. So I'll throw that out as a little bit of a challenge tonight. But I tell that story, one, to start teaching a little bit about hunter awareness. This is something that we're doing year round. I'm always holding the behavior of the animals in my awareness as I move about my day-to-day life. And it has a lot of value day to day, but it also has a lot of value when it's time for me to actually go out and harvest food for my family. And I also share that story just to, celebrate how amazing it is to live in a place where there are species that are in abundance and that I have access to this incredibly sustainable food source, and the ability to not just think about it food, but recognize that it's a living being that I can be in relationship with. And I can understand the populations and a little bit about their life, and appreciate so many things about that. So I'd like to just start off with a little bit of appreciation and gratitude for the natural world, for the birds, and for all the people that have done their best to protect the land and carry these teachings forward of how to even be able to do this in the future. There's an ancient lineage of people passing on hunting skills. As I said, Caleb's part of his ancestry anyways, well, both sides really have been hunting for thousands of years. Part of it on this part of the continent and other parts over the big sea. I know my ancestors, although none of my ancestors here in what we call Canada today were hunters. I know if I trace my lineage far enough back over to Scotland and Hungary, I definitely had hunters in my ancestry. So I'm thankful for the people that pass these lineages on and make them accessible to us today. So just wanted to start off a little bit of gratitude there. So I'm going to introduce our guests right now because we have a few people. We have a whole team that are involved in this project with us. We're going to pass around the room really quick and just to let people kind of say hello quickly. So maybe I'll pass it to you first, Sandy. Do you want to say hey to the team? And then you could just pass it to someone else.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to say hi. Hi, I'm Sandy Reed, and I'm really honored to be a part of this team. Amazing group of people that I consider good friends and mentors, and just people that I can share my heart with in a very safe place about hunting and just whatever, actually. So I'm currently in Ohio, and I've been part of Hunter's Journey for, I think, a little over a year now. So let's pass it on to my better half, Cal. I don't see him. I don't know if I hardly see anybody, Chris. I don't know if you have control of that or not.
Hey, Cal, are you with us still? You want to unmute quick? Oh, okay. Caleb, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah.
Sure. My name is Caleb Musgrave. I'm from Hiawatha First Nation. As Chris was saying, I'm Anishinaabeg, and I've been hunting for about 22 years now. And I'm based here in Hiawatha First Nation. And I've been with the Hunter's Journey since, not exactly its inception, but soon after its inception, about October of 2020. So I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite programs that we run year round. Very, very proud of where we've come with this. And I'm really happy to have all you folks with us tonight.
Carolyn, you want to jump in? I'm just trying to get Cal unmuted here. Not sure what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Can you see me okay? I can basically see you in the chat. Anyways,
yep, you're good. We're on.
I'm in Prince George, BC, so northern BC. I've been with Hunter's Journey for maybe a little less than a year or so. Been hunting since I was a little girl, more recently getting into it independently, and there's so much to learn. There's so much to explore. Being a part of this group is really exciting because there are so many people within the spectrum of hunting, people that have no experience to people that are like Sandy hunting in Africa with all of this amazing experience and all of these great stories. Yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to what's to come out of these chats. I can't see who to pass it to next, so you can pick someone, Chris.
Hey, Cal, you might be able to unmute now. I just made you a co-host. Do you want to give it a try?
Okay.
We gotcha.
Okay, no video feed. Let me see if I can get the video. Oh, there we go. Man, it's a choice-rich environment in this little box, Frodo. Yeah, Cal Reed. I'm currently in my place in West Virginia, and I'm on a satellite internet connection. So sorry for the scratch. I'm like Sandy. I'm just glad to be here and help contribute. And it's thrilling to be with other people of similar mindset and care for the environment and our animals. And yeah, I've been fishing and hunting my whole life, being raised by parents that were born during the Depression. So I'm constantly learning, even though I know a bunch. Sandy always tells me, you don't know what you know. And I'm like, I'm just busy continuing to learn new stuff. So I'm here to join you in the journey because mine's still going. It's never.
Awesome. Thanks, Cal. Appreciate it. There's a few other folks on here that are part of the team, but I might keep kind of just moving along right now. But yeah, there's a few of the folks. We, as I said, we have a whole team that's kind of growing around this that I'm super thankful for. So let's start chatting about some of the, or I'll say it this way, let's start chatting about the journey to becoming a hunter. And I'm going to tell a little bit more of a detailed story about my journey next week. But I want to share a little piece right now as it relates to overcoming some of the challenges and barriers, because like I'd imagine some people on this call tonight, who here is from an urban environment? I'd just be curious if you want to throw that in the chat, if you come from an urban area. But myself, I was actually brought up in the suburbs growing up, and my family, although we were outdoorsy folks, you know, and I say outdoorsy in a very like modern kind of way, you know, we went camping and canoeing and things like that, but my parents weren't naturalists. You know, they didn't understand ecology, and they definitely didn't understand hunting at all. You know, I would say that my whole family and the majority of my friends were anti-hunting growing up because we just had no spectrum from it. You know, and if you're brought up in an urban area, or maybe it's not even necessarily urban, but if you're brought up in a culture that doesn't hunt and particularly isn't well educated in ecology, and doesn't spend a lot of time, you know, really observing the natural world, it's hard to understand how somebody could go or why somebody would go and take a life. So I was definitely in that place to the point that I was literally a vegetarian for 8 years of my life, and even a vegan for a part of that. And without telling that whole story, I'll just share that, you know, a few things shifted for me as I started going deeper down the rabbit hole of my relationship with the natural world. And interesting enough, the more I learned about nature and ecology, the more I started actually becoming interested in hunting and being part of that web of life and the give and take of energy on the landscape. So yeah, it's so easy to go on a tangent down there and tell that whole story, but I don't really want to go there right now. But my point is that I was brought up in the suburbs, and I didn't have a framework for hunting. Something shifted and I felt the calling, but I didn't have any mentor or anyone to get me started. So I started reading a couple of books, and for whatever reason, you know, you talk about kind of myths that we can have. In my head, I just had it that guns were inherently evil and that the only ethical way to hunt was with a bow. I don't know where that came from, but that's just the story, the story I formed in my head when I got going. So I decided I wanted to harvest my first deer with a bow that I made myself. And that sent me on a very long journey. So I literally went and harvested a piece of wood, and a good friend of mine, Skeet Sutherland, some of you may know, he's with Sticks and Stones Wilderness School. He taught me to make my very first bow. And I started shooting it, and then I started looking for land to go out and hunt on. And I moved out of the city and ended up on some property up north. And I started researching, well, where is the public land that you're allowed to actually go and hunt on? And here in Canada, we have what's sometimes referred to as crown land. I prefer to refer to it as treaty land. And it's kind of like the collective land that we all have the privilege to be on together and tend together. So I started finding out where this was, and I literally just went for it. And the number of like ridiculous things that I did, and like just really dumb things that made no sense in trying to learn, like I remember coming in from one of my sits one day and literally being like, all the animals in the forest are laughing at me right now. Like they're gathered around a bonfire right now, and they're all telling jokes about this fool from the city walking through the woods with a bow that he made himself. I had a really good shot when I was shooting at a target that didn't equate to actually being able to get close enough to a deer to take a shot. So long story short with that one, I went through this huge learning curve, and it was 6 years before I harvested my first deer. And I wouldn't change any of it. It was a beautiful journey. I harvested my first deer with a bow and an arrow I made myself. Probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life, and literally changed my entire life and the trajectory of my life. But to go from living in the city to doing that, there was a lot of mistakes along the way. And what's kind of neat, now that we've got this kind of collective going on within our crew in the hunter's journey, we actually had a girl start hunting last fall for her first time, and she got a turkey her first season. And the fall before that, someone part of our hunter's journeys crew, he actually harvested his first deer, his very first season. Both of them were like, almost in tears when they told us the story for how powerful it was with them. And it really speaks to the power of having a community to actually support you and help you grow. And what I can say is, up until that point, I got my first deer, I had almost no mentors. Right around that time is when I started hanging out with Caleb and Skeet and some of these other people that we in our community. And my learning curve went from like this to like that. And then since we've formed this circle here, and now we have Carolyn and Cal and Sandy and Preston Taylor, who's on here, and Jonathan Van Sickle, who's on here, we've been having these bi-weekly calls together that are like, we're calling them the virtual hunt camp. And really, for those of you that don't know what a hunt camp is, often people will go hunting for, let's say, 1 week out of the year or 2 weeks out of the year. And, often people from urban areas, they don't have a place to hunt. So collectively, they have a camp that they go to, that they have permission to hunt. And there's like a big, bunkie that they all sleep in for the week. And what'll happen is everybody will go out, before the sun goes up, spend the day out in the woods, often by themselves in total silence. And all of these magical things happen out there. You might harvest a deer or a moose or whatever you're hunting, but you might also not harvest anything, but you might get to watch a black bear or a fisher or a wolf, or, have a bird come in and land right beside you and you get to watch it. Like these really cool encounters, because you're being quiet, you're being intentional, you're being aware on the landscape for long periods of time. It's so profound and powerful, and it's nothing short of life-changing. So at the end of the night, when everybody kind of walks in at the end of the day, whether you harvested or anything or not, you start making dinner and you start celebrating and telling the day's stories. And this is really supportive from the perspective of, just telling those stories and allowing that excitement to build and the motivation. But you're also collectively learning from each other as this goes on. Because as people tell their stories, they're like, oh, really? I've never heard of a deer doing that. So what did you do? Oh, yeah, well, you saw tracks over there, but you didn't see it. Well, where do you think they are right now? And then these conversations organically break out. And eventually it shifts into, okay, well, what's your plan tomorrow? So today you saw tracks, but you didn't actually see the animal. Or you saw an animal way off in the distance, but you weren't close enough for a shot. So how are you going to change your strategy and adapt to what the land is telling you, what the wildlife are telling you tomorrow? And that's the conversation of a hunt camp. So our virtual hunt camps that we've created are very much like our modern day version of that, when we don't all have the privilege to going to this in-person camp together. We get together every other week and we tell our stories and we share. And as a new hunter, if you get the opportunity to come in on that, there's so much info that can be gleaned on just like, what does it actually look like to go out and do it? And how do you adapt on the fly? Hunting isn't a recipe of, I can tell you that to hunt, you do A plus B plus C, and that's how you hunt. And I could actually lay out a formula. And you know what? In our course, we actually do lay out a formula, but it doesn't look like that when you get out there. Caleb made a joke on a call we had the other night that hunting is A plus B plus crayon plus J plus X plus, transformer. It's there's so many variables that impact it all. And a huge part of the hunter's journey is actually developing your relationship with the land and then being able to adapt to all that information that comes in as you move through it. So that's really what the hunter's journey community has become for me. I'm going to pass it over to Sandy to do some storytelling in a moment here, but one part I wanted to share. So on finding people, it's really supportive to have people that are interested in this, to support you, both the excitement and the energy, and to capture your story, but also to learn together in this. It's nice to have some mentors that know a little bit more than you. It's also really helpful to be working with people that don't know quite as much, because you learn so much trying to support them. So I kind of love the mentorship lineage that we start to find in hunting. But you might be in a situation right now where you don't know anybody that hunts, or maybe the people around you don't agree with hunting, or maybe you only know a handful of people and you don't know where to go, and none of you really know what you're doing. So that can be a barrier, you know. It's hard to stay motivated when you don't have the people or you can't get out. Maybe you don't feel safe going out in the woods on your own. That can be a barrier. How much there is to learn, that can be a barrier as well. But I do want to share there is a little bit of, or there may be a bit of a myth in there as well, in that if you strategically develop the skill set to actually feel comfortable to be in the woods by yourself, a lot of hunters love hunting by themselves. And I predominantly learned on my own. Several of the other instructors in this group actually do a lot of hunting on their own. Sandy, who I'm going to pass it over to in the moment, every call we get together, she tells these amazing, beautiful stories of her spending entire days out in the woods by herself. So just know that as much as, not having people might be a barrier, there could be one of the barriers could be your story, that it's not something you're capable of doing on your own. And you may even find that over time, you actually really cherish that time being by yourself out in the wood in relation with the land and in relation with the animals in this kind of way. I'm going to share a couple of tips that I have on kind of finding people though, but I think I'm going to pass it over to Sandy since I've been talking a fair bit already here. Sandy, I think you have a similar story. So Cal, he's been hunting since he was a little kid. Caleb, he's been hunting since he was a little kid. Sandy, I think your story is similar to mine, where you weren't actually brought up in hunting. And from my understanding, you actually still don't have a lot of people in your life that even get your journey with hunting. So I wonder if you could share a little bit with the group just around how you've kind of dealt with those variables. How have you overcome some of the barriers that held you back? Maybe what were they? How did you overcome them? And yeah, maybe just share some of your advice for the group that are getting started, that are in a similar place in a way.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. I didn't grow up with hunting, and I come from a family, a suburban family. They did not do a lot of outdoor activities, very sports oriented, nothing wrong with that at all. It's just the opportunity wasn't there for any kind of hunting or fishing or anything in the outdoors. But I don't know, it's been a part of my life as long as I can remember, this drive to be in nature and doing things in the outdoors. It's always been there, even as a little child. And as I grew, I just kept looking for opportunities. And as I reflect now, I think my journey to hunting came through everything else, but hunting was the thing that tied it together. So just spending time in the woods. I used to go in the woods and just sit there literally for an hour and just watch. And then that grew to hiking and backpacking and bird watching. And the more time I spent out there, the more I became aware of the rhythm of the woods and the animals. And the more I practiced my stalking skills, I wanted to see things and I had to be quiet to stalk up on a deer. And I wanted to I really had this drive to be a part of things. So just by being out there, I think that was my first step in hunting, and I didn't even know it. So the hunting piece was something I've always wanted to do. I had no way to do it. It really came together after spending years and years doing everything else. And then finding my husband, Cal, once he entered my life, and I shared that desire with him. And together we've made bows and we go out. And today, I love being out there. And I would encourage anybody to go out there and just be, and carry your rifle or carry a stick or carry your bow and just move through the woods. And I did that a lot. And today, my favorite day is just hunting on the landscape. And I do like to do it by myself. And as a woman, I am cautious. I never really expose myself to other people. I tend to, try to fade in the background as I move on the landscape. But it brings everything I've ever done together. Hunting brings it all together. And turkey season's coming up. And there's 1 week, and I'm getting pretty excited about that. I'm going to put a boat in. We're going to go out in the lake and disappear. And I've got 3 days. Hopefully, I can turkey hunt and get a turkey. But the hunt isn't just about getting the turkey. The hunt is about being out there, finding some time for my soul and sinking in to nature and being a part of it and leaving civilization behind a bit and just slowing down and really just living in the moment. That's what I just truly love. And if I do take a life, I'm at peace with that. I've already spent so much time thinking about what that means and honoring that and feeling so grateful and being able to take that animal home and process it and feed my family with it is very empowering. And it just feels right for me. It feels like I finally have the opportunity to do that, to be responsible, to own it, to give gratitude for it, and to take that into my body and the body of my family. And we are one, and I will be able to protect our land and make sure that I save it for all turkeys and all deer. It just feels right for me. So that's why I'm here in this community, because this community gets it. And I know I can talk about those kind of things with anybody that's here. So I guess that's my hunting story. Yeah. And yep.
I wonder, Sandy, about yeah, I always love it when Sandy speaks. I could listen to you tell your story over and over again and all night long, Sandy, by the way. But what I was maybe going to ask is, for people that don't have a mentor right now and they're looking to get started, like, any advice for you? Like, how did you even just start to, because that's a lot to, so you chatted about first you would just go out and you'd sit in the woods and then maybe just moving around with a stick as though you're hunting. Any other tips for somebody that doesn't have a mentor and that feels a long ways away, for just like how to progress from knowing nothing and maybe living in a city to actually getting out a little bit, or maybe meeting other people? Are there any things that have been like maybe high leverage points for you along that journey that have really helped things click or come together?
I have been actually searching for more mentors, to be honest with you. I mean, I have a husband, but there's nobody else in my immediate life that I can hunt with. So it's interesting you asked that, because I am going this weekend to a weekend for women in the woods, and it's sponsored by the National Turkey Federation. And my main reason for going is I want to find a mentor to teach me more about turkey hunting, because I've been going out there on my own and it's slow. And I have gotten one turkey my whole life, but I'm really excited about learning about turkey. And all the turkey classes were canceled, they said, because of lack of interest. I'm like, what kind of, I gave them a really hard time for that. So they promised to set me up with 2 mentors, because I said, what kind of place is this? We're having you're sponsored by turkey and you cancel the turkey classes. I said, we gotta fix that. So they promised me that they would set me up with mentors. So I guess what I'm saying is I have to take responsibility to reach out, and I'm starting to do that. For a long time, I just thought about it. I just thought, I want to hunt, but then I was afraid to do something. So I think that, like, people who are here right now, I want to honor some of you guys. I know I'm seeing names. It's like all these beautiful people in my life are actually here. There's a bunch of you here at this moment, and you're together. And I want to introduce you all to each other. It's so cool to see you. And some of you I don't know, but your being here is doing that, right? Stepping out and looking for relationship and for mentorship. And that's why I'm here. That's why we're here, because we care so much about it. So that's your first step. And if we can help you do that through this, that's why we're here. That's what we're going to do. But you need to reach out to other organizations and other people. And I'm hoping we can help you do that. If you are in my area of the US, I'm going to help you do that. If I find out where you are and our contacts, that kind of thing. But you're going to have to own it a bit. You're going to have to say it's time, and I'm going to reach out. I'm going to bring it to light.
Oh, well said, Sandy. And it does take a little bit of being courageous in this world, But I find most things of value in life do take a little bit of being courageous. So thank you for everything you shared there. I'm going to just kind of summarize a couple of thoughts that I have on like kind of tips around meeting your people, getting out, getting started. I saw, I think it was Susan in there was talking about, I've never even shot a gun or a bow before, So one great starting point is actually, if you live in an area, is just to look, is there anywhere that runs archery classes? Is there a gun club around? And maybe it's just signing up for a couple of archery classes. And you'll get there and, they might just be recreational shooters, but there might be a hunter within the group. But if there's a way to just break the ice on that, that's a great way to just kind of get moving in that direction. But it's also an opportunity to meet other people and get a gauge for whether they have an interest in hunting. And maybe you'll meet your mentor there, maybe it'll be the instructor of the course. You never know. Another place to kind of look is there's all kinds of gatherings that are starting, or I shouldn't say starting, they've been going on for a long time, but gatherings around self-reliance, gatherings around traditional skills, going to any of these gatherings, if you know of one locally, great places. Often you'll find people that are into homesteading, people that are into farming, self-reliance, all those kinds of things. There's often openness in those circles to hunting, not always, but often that you don't find in other cultures. So if you have the ability to go to gatherings and make friends and kind of go with a secret spy mission to figure out who the hunters are within those groups, that can be a way to do it. Interesting enough, one of the guys in our group moved to a new region. So he's part of the longer term mentorship that we run. And he was moved to a new area. He was trying to find hunters, people to go out with, and he was trying to find land to hunt on. And they had a homesteader kind of listserv and Facebook group. So there was an email thread that went around between people in the area. And it was based around homesteading skills and people that kind of wanted to get back to the land. There wasn't anything going on around hunting there. But he had a bit of courage come up, and he basically just posted to the group and said, "Hey, folks, I'm actually taking this course on hunting right now, and I'm really looking to find land to hunt on up here. I'm new to the area. Is there anyone that would be willing to let me come and hunt on their land?" And sure enough, a couple people from the homesteading group actually reached out to him and said, "Hey, let's strike up a conversation and see what you're about." And as far as I know, he has 2 or 3 properties he now is able to hunt. And he's able to have conversations with a number of people in the group that were already hunting in the area. So that can be a great way to start going. What were some other ones that I had there? Yeah, I'll maybe leave it there. There's actually a few ideas there. Just starting to get creative. And of course, searching within your own network as well. You may not want to announce amongst your friends that you're hunting if you come from circles that don't really get it. But you might want to just start thinking, if you start patterning yourself on like who are the people that have hunters and you start asking the right questions, those people might be there and they're just being quiet as well because it's not a culturally normal conversation there. But who do you know that has an aunt and uncle that live up north? Who do you know that lives on a farm? People that live in the North Country often, or in the wilderness, are often more open to hunting. Where I live, every single one of my neighbors in every direction hunts. All of them do. It's very normal up here. So if you know people that have family up north or go up north, for 2 weeks every fall, you might want to ask them what that's about. Hey, do you know people up there that hunt? What's hunting all about up there? And you might be surprised what starts to pop forward when you put that intention on it. So we're gonna shift gears here into a different topic, and I'd like to chat about sustainability in hunting because that's the one that's really passionate to me. And that was another myth that I dealt with. So one myth I had was that I couldn't learn to hunt on my own, and I did. I broke down that myth, and I met my people in the meantime, so I don't have to hunt on my own. Although often I still choose to. Another myth I had was around sustainability, and I was strongly against hunting because I just didn't think it was sustainable. And I only knew the stories of the passenger pigeon, and of these species that were decimated when in a times where there was no seasons and maybe certain, demographics of people were in this, like, there's no end to the wildlife or I have the right to take this dominion over the land kind of mindsets. And humans have definitely done some terrible damage because of hunting, and it's really tarnished it for a lot of people. Caleb, who we're going to bring on in here in a second, though, like as I said, his people have been hunting this land for thousands and thousands of years in a sustainable way. I've learned so much about sustainability from Caleb. And interesting enough, as I said, when I started my journey, I actually went to school to study ecology and forestry. And as I started to learn about ecology, that's when my beliefs that hunting was not sustainable were actually challenged when I started to actually understand predator-prey relationships on the landscape. And the more that I started to understand long-term trend and the interrelation of the web of life, the more I started to understand, oh, like it's totally possible to live in balance with this. And, you know, harvesting deer where I live. So again, I've mentioned that I'm in the Muskoka area of Ontario, and there are more deer here now than there were 300 years ago. So pre-colonization of this land, there's more deer where I live now than there were 300 years ago. There's more turkey here now too than there were 300 years ago. And that's because of the changing habitat here, amongst other things that have happened. I did not know that. You know, when I first started, when I was against hunting, I didn't understand that at all. I had no idea because I didn't really know that much about nature. So I've really changed my perspective a lot as I've understood that. And now when I think about it, like, cool, so I can order beef from Alberta that was pasture fed and had to travel a long ways using fossil fuel, or I can order meat that comes from down south, or maybe even avocados that come from the other side of the continent, or I can actually go harvest a deer when they're in abundance in my own backyard. No fossil fuel involved. That's maybe the most sustainable food that I can be eating. And I'm not saying that everybody can go back to hunting. I don't think that's actually practical. Not without completely redesigning the ecology of the planet or re-healing the ecology of the habit. But I'm also not worried that that's going to happen. The majority of people are not transitioning back to hunting. And what we want to do is capture the people that feel that, like on a deep level, like, I feel like this is part of my path and my journey. We want to work with you to do it effectively, but also know that you're doing it in right relationship with the land and with good ethics. So without further ado, I'd love to pass it over to a good friend of mine. I also consider Caleb a mentor of mine. I've learned a ton from him. So Caleb, maybe you want to speak a little bit about your thoughts on sustainability in hunting and the relationship with people and food on the land. And how do we ensure that we're doing it in right relation with the land?
Totally. Thank you. I consider yourself a mentor of mine as well. So I really appreciate those kind words. First and foremost, when we talk about this landscape that we're on, we have to think about where we are. So where I'm talking about is from the positionality of being in Central Ontario, Canada, and from my background of education, of learning Indigenous environmental studies, as well as anthropology, history, all that kind of stuff. And so that's my worldview. So that's where my perspective comes from. And your perspective can be different. That doesn't mean they're wrong. That means they're just simply different. When I look at the statistics, so what Chris was just talking about was that there is approximately any given moment in North America, in fact, in the Americas period, there is well over 48 million white-tailed deer. At the time of contact, it was estimated that white-tailed deer were around 8 million. So in less than half a millennia, we have more than quadrupled the population of white-tailed deer in the Americas. They have spanned and have now arguably become invasive species into the Western provinces, Western states, Northern territories, as well as parts of South America, though they are also native to parts of South America. There is millions of white-tailed deer. Wild turkey, at the time of contact, were in approximately 37 to 39 of the American states and one province of Canada. They are now in all continental United States except for Alaska. They're in every single province and territory in Canada, I believe, except for Newfoundland and maybe Prince Edward Island. I have to check on Prince Edward Island because, as most Canadians, I always seem to forget about PEI, and I feel really bad about that. So we have way more wild turkey now than we ever have before. We have 7.75 million Canada geese. The Canada goose is at an all-time record, so much so that they have now expanded their range to places like the Orkney Isles of Scotland, the Kamchatka Peninsula between Siberia and Korea, and even down into parts of South America. There's even non-native populations in places like New Zealand where they were transported as a game animal and have exploded in population. The snow goose population of North America is so large that they're actually increasing limits all over the place on limit of season, limit of bag. In most of Canada, there is actually no possession limit. So there's bag limits, which is your daily amount of how many animals you can take. And there's possession limit, which is how many animals you can have in the freezer, in the smokehouse, cut up and preserved into prosciutto, all that kind of stuff. That is your possession limit. There in most of Canada, no possession limit on snow geese because there's just so many of them and they're becoming actually problematic to the ecology. So there's this big myth that we've hunted everything to the brink of extinction. We did, and that was through something called market hunting. Market hunting was a completely different thing than what we have today. Market hunting is this idea of killing animals for food or product. So the market hunting of buffalo for their tongues for the meat as a cuisine, as well as their hides for the Industrial Revolution. All those fan belts had to be powered by something, had to be moved by something or made by something. And that was buffalo leather. The mass wipeout of beaver across Canada and much of the United States during the centuries-long beaver fur trade. That's market hunting. There's also the aspect of when they were killing animals to ship the meat east. Daniel Boone, who's a famous hunter and woodsman of the early colonial periods, made his living at one period literally hunting black bear and extirpating them from regions just to make bacon to send back to the eastern colonies or the eastern states. So market hunting happened, and it was extremely devastating to the ecology. When you wipe out that many animals, the entire food web collapses. Everything starts to fall apart. There was also the aspect of, since the market hunting, unregulated hunting. And unregulated hunting is personal hunting for yourself without any limitations of any kind. So there's no closed season, there is no bag limit, there is no possession limit, there is no limitation on how you take the animals. All that kind of stuff is unregulated hunting. And that has been removed in the majority of North America and the majority of the world, not necessarily everywhere, but the majority of North America, it has been completely squashed because we realized we were devastating populations, devastating ecology, devastating lifeways. When we wiped out the passenger pigeon, when I say we, I'm meaning in a universal we. We all were, all of our peoples were involved with that in one form or another of wiping out the passenger pigeon. That was a primary food source of my people, the Anishinaabe. And we trapped them with bird snares, which is a little snare. This one's made of basswood twine that would be perched on a branch that was lodged into a hole that would then have a spring pole on the other side. And when the bird landed on the branch would dislodge and the pole would spring and the bird's feet would get caught. Then shotguns came along and farmers were fed up with these million bird flocks eating all of their grain, whether it was wheat, barley, corn, you name it. And so shotguns came along and shot the bird to extinction. Add the fact that they tasted really good, and there was a market for that meat in the eastern states and eastern provinces and cities of Canada. So those moments happened. We can't deny those things. Since then, since 1918, when the last passenger pigeon was extinguished of life, and after the 1930s, when beaver populations crashed to an all-time low, the Canadian government, the American government, and even the Mexican government, who people don't seem to mention that there's a lot of hunting in Mexico as well. All of North America agreed at different points that we were going to scrap market hunting, we were going to scrap unregulated hunting, and we were going to bring in a new model of hunting, which is known as the North American model, NAM. And the North American model is not perfect. I want to make that very, very clear. There has not been a model that has come along that is perfect, but it's the closest we've got, and it's the best we've got right now. And as long as we continue to try and make it better, the North American model works. And we can see that with white-tailed deer, wild turkey, Canada goose, snow goose, and many, many other animals. Organizations like Ducks Unlimited, as well as Delta Waterfowl, organizations like the North American Wild Turkey Federation and the National Wild Turkey Federations, they worked so hard that they actually went beyond what they should have done. And now we have way more of those animals than we ever should have had on the natural carrying capacity of the ecosystems. So there is a lot of benefit to looking at stewardship as an aspect of our hunt. For me, as an Anishinaabe man, I look at hunting as a way to provide for my family, but to also participate in the ecosystem. I frequently involve myself in the ecosystem, and I think it is very arrogant of us to think that we can remove ourselves from the ecosystem. Even if we live in a bubble in downtown Toronto or downtown New York City, our resources are being extracted from the ecology. We are still tied to the land that we belong to. And so we have to have a relationship. And hunting for me has been one of the best ways to build that relationship and understand everything, from harvesting wild rice right where I hunt ducks, all the way to building better ecosystems for white-tailed deer, for moose, for elk, and all the other animals, and the smaller game as well, and non-game animals. Because there's always that trickle effect of, if we make it better for the game animals, we're making it better for the non-game animals. Animals like porcupine, fur-bearing mammals, which are only for trapping. You can't just be shooting them with a 22. Some of them you can, depending on what your permit is and where you are and what the regulations are. But we have these models set up, and we have these goals of stewardship. And I'll share a couple of examples of stewardship that I'm a part of. We found a spot this past spring that was the perfect duck habitat for wood duck, mallard, and teal. So what we call puddle ducks. These aren't your big seafaring ducks that dive after fish and such. They're not like mergansers or buffleheads. They are little dabbling birds that go after some insects, some invertebrates in general, but a lot of grains and plants. And that has been my favorite hunt. And so, thinking of it from the perspective, I want to be able to hunt more duck, we started looking at these little pockets of land. And one of them was this spot right between my camp and another ridge where I hunt deer. And there's been a lot of human mismanagement of that area. There's a lot of invasive species. The ground has been heavily disturbed by previous logging operations there that were illegal logging operations that had happened in the past. And so the ecology there has been kind of devastated. There used to be a wetland, and that wetland usually is there in a small pocket, but it hasn't been doing well. And so what we did was we began planting trees. We started planting white oak, white pine, black elderberry, red elderberry, as well as red osier dogwood, Webb's willow, white willow, all these different native trees, silver maple, all along the shoreline to help hold all that disturbed soil so it doesn't erode any further into the wetland. That's been the first part. The second part that we began to do was remove invasive species with extreme prejudice. We have been fighting with Japanese knotweed for 5 months now. It's been quite an interesting project to remove Japanese knotweed from an ecosystem. Very challenging to do. Along with that, we started introducing native species like those trees and shrubs, but also into the small body of water. We introduced monoman, wild rice, into that pocket. And now, though we're not going to be able to really benefit from this spot in the next couple of years because those trees are all little seedlings, by the time my kid is my age, those trees are going to be fairly large saplings, if not full-grown trees. And it's going to be more shaded, and this is going to create a better ecosystem for those wood ducks, mallard ducks, and teals, which is going to benefit my kid, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, and hopefully many, many more people will be able to enjoy themselves under the shade of those white oaks and white pines while they try to get a couple of mallards that are coming down through the opening into that pond. That's just one example. Another example was the heavy management of a property that I've been hunting on for about 6-7 years now, about 35 minutes northeast of me. And I've taken Chris there and a couple of other people that are on this call to this spot. It's a very special place to me. It's 74 acres of very thick cedar bush. And for those of you that don't know, Eastern white cedar, Thuja occidentalis, is a native tree, but like cattail, they can kind of take over. And if they're not kept in check by other native trees, by wildfire, by human use, by animal use, those trees can choke out that ecosystem until it becomes this very thick, understory that nothing can really move through. And when you find spots like that, very rarely do you find more than the occasional red squirrel, maybe the occasional turkey or ruffed grouse, but very few animals are really moving through that ecosystem. And so we began to work on that property. And as we started working on that property, we were removing cedars, planting hardwoods, finding the old growth hardwoods on that property, and now tending to them. We have red elms and white elms on that property, which are nearly extinct in Ontario. They're almost completely extirpated in our region. And we're finding old growth ones that are massive, massive elms. And we're helping them by spreading their seeds because maybe they're resistant to Dutch elm disease and all this kind of stuff. Removing the cedars that are strangling their seedlings and all that kind of stuff. And now it's opening corridors for deer. And in the almost 7 years of me hunting on this property, we're seeing a quintupling of white-tailed deer. We're seeing black bear moving all over we're seeing more black bear than we're seeing white-tailed deer, which we don't hunt bear on that property. So it's just something that we get to enjoy every time they walk by us in our tree stands, or when we find them in our tree stands, like what happened to me a couple of years ago. But as we continue, we're opening up certain parts and fixing the soil there, all because it's a property that was heavily used for agriculture for decades or generations before they left it to go fallow and the cedars took over. So slowly we're rebuilding that soil and all this stuff just to be able to have a better hunt down the road. In our eyes, it's a very selfish thing. But from the ecology, now we're seeing all these animals. I got to see a fisher marten for the first time on that property. We get to see red foxes and wild turkey all over the place, just not when I go wild turkey hunting there. Ruffed grouse, we now found a pond on the property that 2 years ago when we discovered it was full of teal, mallard, wood duck, and many other types of ducks and geese, including some swans and bitterns, a bittern being a non-game bird. So we introduced monomen, wild rice, which is a very common wetland plant in our area. And now we're seeing ducks arriving in droves, even though this is our deer hunting property. And we occasionally hunt duck there, but not very often because I live surrounded by duck habitat where I live. We're seeing a benefit to the ecology. We're seeing more fungi. We're seeing so much other stuff happening there. And it's just small steps every step of the way. This stewardship can be simply you cleaning up your trash from your shotgun shells or rifle casings, all the way to finding other people's garbage and cleaning it up off the property, cleaning it out of the tree lands, cleaning off private property, whatever it may be. The last story I want to give was a story that both Chris and I can share because we were both witness to this whole situation. This past May, I believe it was May 8th, somewhere around May 8th, May 9th, we went out turkey hunting. Chris and I had one day each together that we could actually meet up and go and see if we can bag a turkey. And it was actually at this property that I was just talking about. And though we didn't see a lot of sign of turkey on the property, I knew where there was a nearby roost on another neighborhood or another neighboring property. And so we went and talked to the property owner because that's the first thing you do before you even think of crossing onto that property or even really more than glassing at it. You talk to the property owner. That's just good, proper, polite, neighborly niceties. They turned us down because they liked having the turkeys because the roost was right over their house and they feed the turkeys and all that kind of stuff. But they said, hey, if the turkeys come onto the property you're allowed to hunt on, we're not going to be mad at you. I'm like, awesome. Do you mind if we just kind of glass it because we can see the turkeys in your field right now? Do you mind if we take a look at them with binoculars from the road just to kind of get an idea of what these turkeys look like? And as we looked at them, we thought we saw 3 tom turkeys. Now, toms are sexually mature male turkeys, tom turkeys, and there's jakes, which are a little bit more immature. They are also sexually mature, but they're not fully mature. They're the ones everybody wants to get. And in some seasons, in some areas, that's the only one you're allowed to shoot. Where we are, you're allowed to shoot in the springtime bearded turkeys, which means it's got to be a tom or a jake. They've got this very specialized, almost like a mutant looking feather that comes out of their throat that looks like my beard, oddly enough. And we were looking at them. We saw 3. But every once in a while, I could have sworn I saw 4 fans, which is their big tail display that the males show to intimidate other toms, but to attract and entice hens, the female turkeys. And Chris was like, yeah, I thought I saw a 4th fan over there too. So we sat there for an extra 20 minutes and kept looking, and we saw these 3 toms circling what looked like a hen. I'm like, okay, there's a hen turkey, and looks like she's almost nesting, but maybe she's doing like a mating display. We can't quite tell. There's a lot of thick bush between us. And then she stood up, and we saw her beard and her fan. And what was going on was there was a 4th tom. Why is he acting like this? And then we noticed that he wouldn't walk very far. And then he took a step and we saw him hobble. And then I zoomed in with my binoculars and we saw this giant bulge coming out of his foot, both on the top and the bottom. It looked like, comparison on my hand, it would look like a tennis ball sticking out of my hand. That's the size of it in comparison to what it was like on his foot. And that's when I realized, because I raise waterfowl as a livestock on my property as a pet, as well as to get food from eggs, I recognized bumblefoot. And bumblefoot is a disease. It's an infection that is caused by either something pricks the foot or it's a sliver of something. And it starts at basically a staph infection that can be systemic. And if it's not treated, it can creep up the leg, creep up into the thigh, creep into the body, and eventually lead to a blood poisoning that reaches the heart and kills the animal. Or, as in the case of this tom turkey, they do not get to live a long, fruitful life. Now, in all reality, the long, fruitful life of a wild turkey is about 3 to 4 years long. They're a very short-lived bird. But this turkey's not going to be able to feed very well. We could tell that he was very skinny, so he was not being able to feed as often as the other ones. He was not going to be contributing to the gene pool because he was being very submissive to all the other turkeys. Even a Jake that came by, he remained very submissive with because he didn't want to risk injury with his foot. And so he wasn't going to be contributing to the gene pool. He's not going to be living a long, fruitful life. He's not doing healthy. And that day, Chris and I agreed that evening while we're looking at this turkey, that's the one we're both going to target. If we are going to take any Tom turkey out of this flock, if it comes over to the property that we're on, that's the one we're going to take. And we both swore to each other that was our goal. And we promised ourselves and each other that was the turkey we would take. No other Tom would do. That's the one we take. Now, that attitude is often what you hear from what we consider trophy hunters. That's the buck. I'm not touching any other buck. That's the buck I'm getting with that specific antler range and antler rack and all that kind of stuff. But this is not the same situation. This was the perspective of two gentlemen who really, as much as I'm using the term gentleman very loosely for me, at least. But this is two gentlemen, two people who decided that turkey has suffered enough. That turkey is not going to help anybody in the ecology. We should remove that one from the population so that there's less stress on that population. Because when one Tom in the flock is floundering, the other ones actually start to slow down, check on them, get involved. And if a coyote is nearby, they may pick the sick one, but they may also take an opportunity on one of those healthier, larger Toms or really fat hens, whatever the other better animal, for such a strange term to me, is. That Tom has to go. Now, sadly, we never got a chance on him. And then I found out from the property owner about a month ago that he was taken by a coyote. Better than suffering all winter long in my books. But I feel like I could have done a lot better with a shotgun, 4 months before that. Regardless, that is, to me, very simple stories highlighting what stewardship can be. We are a part of the ecology. We are a part of the ecosystem. And to do best at hunting, we need to do best as we can as stewards. And they just walk hand in hand so well. Hunters have been contributing to the ecology for a lot more money and a lot longer time than anybody else in North America. Almost all tax dollars that come from sales of firearms, as well as other hunting equipment in the United States, goes to conservation. Most of the tax dollars that comes from hunters here in Canada who are paying into their local Ministry of Natural Resources, that money goes into conservation. We donate to Ducks Unlimited. We donate to the National Wild Turkey Federation, all that kind of stuff. A lot of the work that goes into conserving these animals comes from hunters. And yeah, you can say that's because you have to, but we don't gripe about it. We want to do that. We love helping the ecology. We love seeing more wetland habitat. We love seeing more deer habitat. We love seeing all the animals succeed because that means someone down the road has a chance to still hunt. And as self-serving as that could be, I look at that as the same philosophy as a wise person plants a tree that they know they'll never enjoy the shade from. And that's what I look at as stewardship and sustainability in hunting. So that's my rant. I know I went way over time. I'm going to hang up at this point. I'll pass it back to Chris.
That wasn't a rant at all, Caleb. That was beautiful. Yeah, really well said, friend. That was really great there. That kind of makes me think, we're going to transition gears in a moment here, but one kind of thing that I think I would summarize that piece in, Caleb, when we talk about people that are new to hunting and want to get into this, and how do you start if actually getting out in the woods feels so far away? I don't even know how to shoot. I don't know where to go. Studying ecology is a huge starting point, to just get out in the woods and start learning your trees. Well, what are the deer eating, and what are they eating every season of the year? What are the squirrels eating right now? Is there a big acorn crop or a poor acorn crop this year? And how's that going to impact the mouse population next year? Because there's a triple effect through that. So just starting to literally learn your trees, learn what wildlife are around, observing them, all of that is relevant to hunting if you're going to do it in a way that's sustainable and in right relation with the land. And it's also going to impact the success you have as a hunter. The better you are as a naturalist and an ecologist, the better hunter you're going to be too. So that's super relevant and a great starting point to think about there. So I love the way you wove all those pieces in there, Caleb. What I think we're going to do, like often we go a little bit over. You can tell our team is super passionate and can just talk about this stuff all night. We often end up running a little longer than we wanted. I want to do a question and answer session with the audience in a moment here and take any questions from the crowd for any of our mentor team here tonight. I also wanted to touch on gear really quick because that was one of the things when people, thank you to everyone that responded to the email I put out asking what are the challenges holding you back? I really like getting that information because it guides what we put together and offer. And one of the questions we came up around people's like, gear is so expensive and I have no idea where to even start. So I do want to share a couple notes on that quick. But before we do the Q&A and the gear, I just want to talk a little bit about the Hunter's Journey community that we're putting together. So as we've kind of mentioned it a couple times tonight, that the group of us have been collectively putting together this, people keep saying, well, this is an online course on hunting. And like, I don't see this as an online course at all. It very much is a community and a collective that's there to support each other in going. And as you're probably grasping, like hunting there's a lot to know, it can be very overwhelming when you're getting going. And everyone that's talked so far tonight, Cal, Sandy, Carolyn, a couple other people on here that haven't spoke. I saw Skeet just chimed in. Hey, Skeet. Preston Taylor, Jonathan, Ben Sickle. We have this amazing team with a wealth of knowledge. And what we basically do is we get together on calls like this, but you're actually able to unmute yourself and show your video. And we tell stories from in the field of what we're doing in hunting and how we're adapting as we go. If students in the course are hunting, or if you're not ready to hunt, you can join and hunt with a camera this year. And just get out and try and get close to wildlife and observe them without them seeing you. That's a phenomenal first step. But what we do is we meet bi-weekly in a much smaller group where we can actually get to know each other on a first name basis. And our goal is to meet you where you are at right now and help you take the next step on your hunter's journey, or actually take a bunch of steps on your hunter's journey. So that's kind of our aim. So, it is labeled an online course, but it's so much more than that because the community part is very real there. And it has a few different components to it. So we do these bi-weekly calls, which we call the virtual hunt camp. So every other week during the main hunting season, spring and fall, we have these bi-weekly calls where we jump on and we share stories from the day, but we also talk about, okay, well, Caleb, what did you see today? Oh, that didn't work. What are you going to do tomorrow? And then maybe Cal will pop in and be like, hey, Caleb, have you ever thought about trying this? Or maybe Sandy will pop in and be like, hey, Caleb, what if you tried this tomorrow? And you actually get to learn what it actually looks like to adapt and apply all the skills and tactics. So there's that component of it. There is also a call series called Base Camp. And Base Camp starts October 12th or 13th. And they're 4 consecutive Wednesday evenings. And those are for the total beginners. Like, I don't have a gun. I don't have a bow. I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to go. Or maybe it's like, well, I've got a gun. I've never used it. Or I've been hunting once before with a friend, but it still feels so far away. So the Base Camp calls happen 4 consecutive days in October. And those are where we just it's a much smaller group. And we really just hammer in the foundations of going from total beginner to actually getting out into the field this season, whether you're hunting with a weapon or whether you're hunting with a camera. We help you go through all the challenges of your unique situation. You can ask us questions. We can work through stuff together. So that's the Base Camp calls. That's part 2. And then part 3 is we have this awesome video library that we've been building where once you're actually ready to be like, okay, I'm about to go duck hunting for my first time. What do I do with the duck? Well, you can come to the video library and pull up a video of myself showing you how to clean a duck, or a Caleb showing you how to cook the duck afterwards, or Cal showing you how to butcher a deer, or Jonathan teaching you how to actually shoot that new compound bow that you got. So we've been building out this awesome video library. It's also full of checklists. So like beginner hunters checklist, what do you need to do? Your checklists, things like that. So I won't talk too much longer about this, but the Hunter's Journey, the fall cohort, we just opened up enrollment, and we would love to have you if you're feeling, that call deep within, if you resonate with the values in our instructor team. We have a lifetime access special. Hunting is a lifelong journey. I think in the future, we're probably going to have like a monthly fee that people pay. But right now, anyone that joins has access long-term, meaning you get this fall's calls, but you can also join us next spring as well when we're doing the calls. And we have a early bird special on. The early bird special is going to end after next Tuesday's call. So the early bird special is on right now. And if you enter the code HUNT75, you'll get an additional $75 off the early bird special. So I'm going to throw those links in the chat really quick. www.thehuntersjourney.com, and HUNT75 is the early bird code for an additional $75 off. And if you got any questions, feel free to email me. I'm going to throw my email in there as well. If you're kind of on the fence and you're trying to assess if this is for you or not, feel free just to fire me an email and we can talk it through. And, it may be a fit, it may not. And I'm happy. I'll be honest with you if I think we can help you or not. So I won't say anything else on that right now. Yeah, Tyler just gave a shout out there. Tyler joined us back in the spring. He actually ended up coming out with Caleb and I hunting for turkey. He was part of us that day that Caleb told that story. And we are working on in-person gatherings for 2023 for people that are part of the course as well. So we do want to have some in-person stuff as well. But I'm going to leave it there and let's open it up for Q&A. Maybe just with our team here, Sandy, Caleb, Carolyn, even Preston or Skeet who jumped on. Anybody have anything that they want to share with the group here before we wrap things out with some questions? Just unmute yourself if you want to, or throw something in the chat. I'm basically just trying to give myself a second to catch my breath.
I'm good, Chris. I think I've heard a lot of ground covered.
Awesome. All right, let me just make a quick comment on gear, and then we'll open up to the crowd. So if you've got questions, you can just throw them in the comments. You can even start writing them into the comments right now, and then maybe I'll read the comments out loud, and then someone in our team here, Cal, Caleb, Sandy, whoever can jump in and answer them. So what I wanted to say about gear, the gear part is definitely overwhelming when you get started. Hunting gear is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There is tons of gimmicks and gadgets that you don't need. There's also some really cool stuff that's really helpful, but it's expensive. And you don't need almost any of it to get started. When I first started hunting, I literally had a stick that I carved myself. Skeet Sutherland is on here tonight. You guys remember my story from the beginning when I said someone taught me to make my first bow? That was Skeet. He just joined the call partway through. So shout out to Skeet for helping me make my first bow in Sticks and Stones Wilderness School. But anyways, I literally had a stick that I carved with a knife, an arrow that I made out of a piece of stone. I had earth tone clothing, not too much different than what I'm wearing right now. And I had a knife to process that animal with. And that literally is all you need to get started. That with a bunch of knowledge and of course your license to do it legally. And I actually encourage you when you're starting out to not spend a lot of money on gear, because what you'll find, I've actually wasted a ton of money on junk I don't need hunting that I kind of regret. And now it's garbage. There's a lot of gimmicks out there. And what you'll find is there's many different ways to hunt. There's many different strategies. Actually out of all this whole team here, all of us actually hunt a little bit differently. And depending on your strategy, you're actually going to need different gear. So I have different gear than Caleb has and different gear than what Sandy has. So it's actually really valuable to actually put in a season or two hunting with bare minimums, get out with some other hunters and see what they're using. And as you decide how you want to hunt and what style you want to hunt in, then you start buying those pieces of gear to actually support you doing that more effectively. But the bare minimum, you need either a bow or a firearm, or maybe even an air gun. You need some earth tone clothing that's hardy to the weather. You need your license, and you need a knife to process. And that's really the starting point right there. All the rest you kind of pick up and learn over time. So keep it simple. That's my advice there. And I'm going to dive into the questions right now. We'll take a couple of questions. We'll wrap it up. Cal, you want to jump in, please?
Yeah, just one comment on the clothing. Try to pick stuff that is quiet, that has a soft finish to it on your clothing. So you're likely to have something that you can use right now.
I just realized I'm muted. I'm going to throw up another video in the link. I actually have a YouTube video that I did, a free one on camo clothing. I'm going to share that in the link here in just a moment. But okay, let's go to questions here. How do you get over the goriness of processing your first animal? I'm wondering if Sandy or Caleb want to jump in. Caleb, you want to go in on that, please?
Sure. I thought I talked enough, but now we're going to talk about one of my favorite things. The first thing I'd recommend is start buying whole meat. Just start from there. If you're already buying meat, don't stop yet, okay? Because you're going to freak yourself out the first time you open up an animal and you accidentally open the craw of a duck or something. You see all the bugs and you think they got parasites. Don't worry about that yet. Get a whole leg instead of boneless chunks of beef. Get a whole chicken and learn how to take apart the bird. Learn how to debone the leg. Then from there, start honestly just cooking organs and trying to taste them. Cook liver, cook heart, cook kidney, all that. Now, I'll tell you right now, that sounds gross. I can't stand kidney. I've been eating kidney my entire life. I can't stand this stuff. But I've learned to kind of overcome those queasy moments because I know that what I'm looking at is actually food. It's just food without saran wrap. So starting there is one great option. The other one is simply, and I want to make this very clear. I'm not one of those people that's into the whole like harden up kind of attitude, but you will notice the more you process game and the more you process animals in general, the faster that goes away. When I first helped my father gut a deer, I was dry heaving the whole way through. The second time, it wasn't pleasant, but I could do it. The third time, we took a break and I ate a sandwich. Like, you get used to it over time. And I don't want to make this sound like one of those harden up kind of attitudes. It's not, because I completely empathize with anybody that gets queasy over it. I can't stand cleaning my cat's litter box, but I have to do it. And so I learned to accustom myself to the suffering. So trust me, I understand when it comes down to how like gnarly that can be when you start seeing all the organs and such. Just keep in the back of your mind, this is what food is. And I've eaten steak, I've eaten roast, I've eaten liver and onions. I've cooked myself a heart burrito once. Okay, I've helped take apart a chicken. I've helped take apart a leg of a steer. Now where do I go? Okay, well, that's just some blood. Okay, the blood, and I just make sure the organs are over here and yada, yada, yada. Over time, you can just get accustomed to it. It's about building yourself up to it at your pace.
Awesome. Great answer there, Caleb. The other one I would just add on that. So Caleb talked about, buying meat from the store. That's a fantastic answer, actually, and a great way to get started with it. When you actually start hunting, if you're really intimidated by the idea of processing an entire deer, then start with something small. I often recommend squirrel hunting, like gray squirrel, is a fantastic starting point as a hunter. Much less intimidating to think about processing a squirrel, and maybe even less intimidating to thinking about taking a life of a squirrel. And, that's kind of a weird psychological thing, and you may or may not have it, but often people don't have as hard of a time hunting something smaller or lower down the food chain than hunting something larger. So that's just something you could think about as well, as starting with something like a squirrel when you're starting out. Let's see, I'm just looking, what else do we have? Does anyone have experience hunting in territories affected by the logging industry and spray? Now, I can say that I definitely hunt areas that have been logged heavily, and it can actually work to your advantage. The first few years after, it's actually interesting. I'll just so where I live, was 6-7 years ago, they came through and they did a pretty heavy cut in a bunch of the treaty land around me. About 2-3 years after that, the deer population exploded in that area. And what basically happened is, as they open up the forest canopy, you get all of these brambles growing up, things like raspberry coming up and all of these other things that are berries, really good fresh foliage. And the deer population actually spiked for a couple of years and then started to level out again with it. So logging, I can't make any comment right now as to whether that logging was done in a good or a bad way without seeing it. I'm not against logging in any means, although it can be, just like hunting, it can be done poorly or it can be done in a good way. But you can definitely work around heavily logged environments, and there's many species that thrive in those environments and can be hunted in those environments. I don't have a lot of experience around spraying. Caleb, did you want to add something to that? I thought I put your finger up, or?
I think Preston wants to comment on that. I think he'll have a lot more insight on this.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Preston, that would be great. Preston, just give me a second here. I need to unmute you. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so Preston Crew has been, he comes in as a guest instructor with us sometimes. And Preston is actually a wildlife biologist out on the West Coast. Preston, you should be able to unmute yourself. I just made you a co-host. Thanks so much. Preston also, I'll just say, sorry, before you start there, Preston runs Tracker Longbows. Maybe Sandy or Caleb can throw the link in there. He's got an amazing book on black bear tracking and hunting. Phenomenal read if you want to learn about black bear ecology. So check out Preston's book. But over to you, Preston.
Oh, thanks. So I usually logging companies that are spraying herbicide are targeting the hardwoods. Well, at least where I live, they're targeting the hardwoods because they want the conifers to grow back. So I watch for places where all the hardwoods have died You know, like if a whole hillside of hardwood shrubs are dead, I know that they've sprayed herbicide. And you can also contact the timber company and ask them for a map of what chemicals they're using and where they're spraying and what years they've sprayed. Some of these chemicals have really short half-lives and break down pretty quickly, and other ones can build up in the plant's leaves. You know, I really hate the use of chemicals on the landscape. So I kind of avoid those areas. But there are like huge swaths of Western North America that are getting covered with herbicides. Some of it is essentially the same as Agent Orange. It's pretty gross. Yeah, glyphosates, that's a big one. And then 2,4-D, that's another big one that's being used. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. And I think, you know, if you're in a place that has industrial logging, talking to the timber company about, you know, what they're using and where they're using it is important. A lot of them are colored too, and so you can see if they've been sprayed recently. They're purple or orange or things like that. Yeah, but I don't know. I just go talk to the timber companies, yeah, or the Forest Service, whoever, or the state, whoever's managing that landscape, you know, and ask them if they're using it. And if they are, you know, I would avoid those areas potentially. Yeah.
Thanks, Teff. And it's too bad that we even need to have that conversation, you know, and some of the stuff that we're hoping to do with as this hunter's journey community grows is to have a bigger pool of people advocating for better stewardship, both in other practices, whether it's forestry, but also within the hunting industry itself. You know, one of the things that I would really, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'll share it quick. One of the things I would love to see, and I know there's some companies working on it, when we go duck hunting for shotguns, you know, a lot of hunters will leave their casings in the bush, which I hate seeing that, little pieces of plastic and metal. We will sit there and make every effort to pick them up. We'll pick up other people's garbage. But the one thing that happens is there's a plastic wad that shoots out the end of your shotgun, and that's almost impossible to retrieve. You know, so one of the things I'm really looking forward to is when we start finding ways to make biodegradable wads coming out of our shotgun shells. So there's a big switch right now to move away from lead ammunition. Where we live in Canada right now, you already hunt waterfowl with non-lead ammunition. It's actually illegal to hunt waterfowl with lead ammunition because of the lead in the wetlands, but we're still leaving lead on the landscape when we hunt other animals with lead, and we're potentially putting it into our meat. And there are non-lead alternatives for hunting pretty much everything now. So those are some of the things that we're really trying to advocate with in this work here, and something you can think about. Okay, we're just going to take one or two more questions. I'd like to kind of wrap up by 9:30, which is about 5 minutes. Thanks again, Preston. Remember, Tracker Longbows. You can check out Preston's work there, and he's got an amazing bear tracking book. Victoria asked, if you don't want to process all your meat, do any of you take your harvest to a local butcher? If you don't have the space to store it, do you take it to the food banks or the charities? So I process all of my harvest myself. I think everyone in all of our mentors, I'm pretty sure, process their whole harvest themselves. It's a really rewarding experience to go right from making the harvest to putting it in the freezer. And there's not as much to it as you might think. You know, it's really a rewarding way to relate to your food. As I say that, you can definitely take your deer to a butcher and they'll do it for you. It's quite expensive, but lots of hunters do actually bring their deer to a butcher shop. My question for you, you would say, if you don't have the space to store it, do you take it to a food bank or a charity? So here, I don't know about the laws in all different areas, but generally it's kind of what Caleb talked about with the conservation part at the beginning there. It is illegal or highly frowned on in most areas to sell wild game meat or even really give it away beyond just kind of sharing amongst your immediate family, because that potentially encourages people to take more than what they need. And my question for you with that would be, is if you don't have the space for the deer, then maybe you shouldn't be harvesting a deer to begin with. If you're looking for what you're gonna do with the meat, maybe you want to think about harvesting a squirrel or a duck or a turkey where you actually have the means to process it and deal with it. So I would just encourage you not to harvest more than you need to begin with. And that's part of being a good steward, in my opinion, anyways. Caleb, did you still want to comment? Please do.
Yeah, I worked as a butcher's apprentice for 2 years in high school, and I can actually tell you, when butchers get deer in the fall, they are inundated with deer in the fall. And there is 75% chance that that is your deer that shows up in the box after they cut it up for you. There's a 25% chance it's some other guy's deer. So there's that concern. There's also the simple concern of actual hygiene purposes, the dispersal of chronic waste and disease. There's a lot of reasons that people do not approve of donating meat. Sometimes though, like I personally think that like what I do with my meat, I take a deer and I share it with everybody in my family. I make sure that everybody gets fed. If I open my freezer in June and there's still moose meat or a deer in there, I'm not hunting a moose that fall because I clearly could not use it all up before the summertime when I'm already looking at filling the freezer with fish and everything else I'm going to be going after in the early seasons. So I'm always donating a lot of my meat to my family members, to relatives, my grandmother, my mother, people like that, my aunties, my uncles who can't hunt anymore. But there is aspects of trading or giving away meat that is considered illegal. Not always the case, but actually I was having this conversation with Tyler earlier this evening. There is an aspect to that comes from the market hunting where they just do not want to encourage people. Some states in the United States allow it, as Cal was mentioning. In the state of New York, they attempted to actually do a food drive thing where they had to cull deer because the deer population was too big, and they tried to donate, have it so that the hunters could donate the meat to food kitchens. And then anti-hunting legislation or lobbyists pushed and basically kiboshed that. It's not always the case, but sadly, sometimes it's just public opinion. It's not always necessarily based on actual health concerns.
Awesome. Thanks, Caleb. And yeah, as Cal mentioned, some places in the States you can donate to food banks. So you're going to just have to check your local regulations around that. I mean, obviously hunting for your food bank, if you're doing it in a sustainable way, is definitely something I support. But so there's a beautiful thought there. I think we're going to leave it there for questions. If you're not on our Hunter's Journey Facebook group yet and you're on Facebook, that's a great way if you didn't have your question answered tonight. And of course, if you would like a mentor and really a whole community to help you kind of work out all of the challenges, literally going from how do you choose your first firearm or bow to how do you find land to hunt, how do you get your license, how do you learn the skills and tactics, how do you process it, how do you process the hide, how do you cook with it? We cover all of this in depth in the Hunter's Journey. The cohort's open right now. We'd love to join you. So you can go to thehuntersjourney.com and you can enter Hunt 75 if you want an additional $75 off of the early bird special. I also hope that some of you will join us next Tuesday when we're going to kind of share about our personal hunter's journeys, why we hunt, what it means to us, how it's changed and shaped us as people. So thanks everybody for a great night. Hopefully we'll see some of you in the fall cohort, and hopefully we'll see some of you next week as well. Thank you, Sandy, Cal, Caleb, Carolyn, Preston, and everybody who joined us this evening.